Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Victoria Hanson and I'm the Programme Manager here at the New York Times for Times Journeys. Why travel with the New York Times? Well, first and foremost, on each of our 70 plus departures, you'll be accompanied by either a New York Times journalist or subject matter specialist. We offer a programme of both small group tours and specialist cruises, working with cruise lines of the likes of Holland and America and Cunard. And for our small group tours, you'll be travelling with no more than 25 guests. We visit destinations that tell a story, locations as diverse as Cuba, Provence, Myanmar, and Austria. And we offer you exclusive access with the opportunity, depending on the trip, to escape the crowds with tours that include after-hours entrance to museums or the best seats in the house. But without further ado, let's move on to this specific trip. Your tour will start in New York City on January the 2nd, 2016, and end in Southampton, England, 9 days later. Some of the trip highlights, of course, this is a bucket list trip for many people, so the cruise itself, the Transatlantic crossing, and the full onboard programming, including lectures from our 5 New York Times experts. Then, exclusive to Times Journeys guests, we include a one-night pre-cruise stay in New York City, complete with a tour to the New York Times building. You then get to see the newsroom, you'll get to hear from some of our journalists in the building, and you'll also enjoy brunch. Once on board the ship, you'll get the opportunity for small group Q&As with our journalists, 2 cocktail parties, a drinks package, and also lunch at Todd English. You'll have the option to extend your trip with a post-cruise extension in London as well. And what about the Queen Mary 2, the ship that you'll be sailing on? Well, she entered service in 2004 and she was refit in 2011. She has 1,253 crew on board and has a passenger capacity of less than 3,000. What about some of the facilities? Well, you could be swimming in one of the 5 swimming pools. You could relax in the Canyon Spa Ranch, enjoy afternoon tea, or how about get ready for one of the formal nights from your stateroom? Take one of the drinks in your inclusive package in the Commodore Club, or enjoy an after-dinner show at the Royal Court Theatre. But this is where I'd like to introduce you to our onboard experts. We have 5 that will be joining and joining the ship throughout the cruise. And opening it up is Clyde Haberman. Clyde worked at the Times for more than 35 years. Starting as a Metro reporter, he worked up the ladder, becoming our New York City columnist in 1995, a position he held for 16 years. Clyde, it's great to have you here today.
My time with the New York Times goes back even further to when I was a copy boy, an office boy, back in the mid-1960s. There was a break there. I also was a foreign correspondent for 13 years, and the topics that I've chosen for the seminars reflect both my years abroad and my long New York experience. I'll start with New York. New York is, for many people, endlessly fascinating, perhaps more for New Yorkers than for many others. It has been, in many ways, a pace setter for American cities in many, many ways. It is, as most of you probably know, under new management, if you will, new mayor for the last year and a half, who's far more progressive than at the previous 20 years. And questions abound for many people of whether or not this agenda of Mayor de Blasio will work. Will certain fears of rising crime return? Or is that simply a tabloid-driven bogeyman of no validity? More broadly speaking, the New York experience is good to look at the 2016 election and whether or not the metropolitan areas, cities in particular, will be on anyone's agenda during the race. Experience shows that they tend not to be. We've had a former mayor of New York run for president, and he didn't discuss cities very much, nor did, frankly, the former Chicago community organizer who's now in the White House. So the the plight of cities is always important, and we like to discuss that at one of the seminars. The Middle East, where I worked for more than 4 years, is another area. Obviously, so much is going on, very little of it heartening. In particular, I will probably focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I was based in Jerusalem for more than 4 years, and it's an area and issues that on which emotions ride enormously high, and we'll discuss the prospects for anything approaching peace. The words shalom and salam are heard endlessly in that region. They're probably the most elusive and abused words on the planet. Um, Another somewhat urban-related topic for a seminar will deal with policing now. The militarization of many of our police forces. This has picked up speed in the years since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan began to wind down. A lot of equipment, very heavy equipment, stuff that you would expect to see more in Fallujah in Iraq rather than on the streets of our cities, have been turned over to police forces. And where that now stands, and where police community relations stand in this era post Ferguson and other North Charleston and other phenomena that we all know of will be very much on our minds. Some of that may depend very heavily on what we discussed. It may depend on the developments of news between now and January. And then I'd like to turn our focus in one seminar to East Asia, which arguably is where America's economic interests really lie, even though national attention is so often focused on the Middle East. Certainly, President Obama has tried to turn America's foreign policy direction toward East Asia. He's been greatly frustrated in this. And among the things we'll explore is China, whether or not it is truly a partner in any way for our country, or is it, frankly, an enemy, one that shares virtually none of our values. So that would basically be what I hope to discuss.
Thank you so much, Clive. That's obviously a very varied program there, and one I think that's something for everybody. I'd now like to introduce David K. Johnston. He is the recipient of the Pulitzer Prize, an IRE medal, and the George Polk Award. He is an investigative journalist and author. David?
Well, thank you. I am going to present 4 lectures to provide a foundation for people to understand what is going on in modern America. After I retired from the New York Times in 2009, I was invited to teach in the law school and the graduate business school at Syracuse University, and developed courses on the law of the ancient world, the property and tax law, and the regulatory law. So I'm going to start off talking about how everything in the modern law, with one exception, can be found in Hammurabi's Code, which is almost 4,000 years old. I'm going to show its influence today in terms of the thinking of the ancients in a number of societies, because people back then figured out all the basic things we need to understand about human behavior. Then I'm going to explain about the most enduring idea in Western civilization, progressive taxes, and how progressive taxes and democracy were born together. They are the civil twins bequeathed to us by the ancient Athenians. Then I'm going to talk about regulation in modern America. And while we all hear about businesses complaining about overregulation, the fact is that regulation in modern America was the result of 2 major forces. One was technology that created a requirement to do this to stop deaths, awful deaths, and how business very quickly embraced regulation and in fact sponsored many of the regulatory laws that have endured from the 19th century and the first roughly half of the 20th century. And we're going to look in particular at early steamship explosions, including the Etna in New York Harbor in 1824, and how long before Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, Congress passed a law to ensure the safety of beef, pork, and poultry, but not for Americans. And finally, I'm going to talk about what I think is one of the biggest and most important trends in America, an issue that's part of the trilogy I wrote on the American economy, Perfectly Legal, which is about taxes, Free Lunch, which is about regulations, and the Fine Print, which is about monopolies and restraint of trade. And that's the growing trend to paying taxes that never get to the government, to you're paying other people's taxes, and to, in many cases, you're actually paying taxes to the company you work for without even knowing about it. The law is written so cleverly to hide this. And my hope is that those who attend these lectures will get a clearer understanding of the nature of what's going on in the modern American economy and how we can develop the rules that will help us best prosper and ensure that the liberties of the people endure.
Thank you very much, David. Your last topic on paying other people's taxes, I think, is going to strike a chord with a lot of people here, and it's one that I'd love to hear more about. Climate change is John Schwartz's beat, but since joining the Times 15 years ago, he's written for nearly every section of the paper, as well as being a published author himself. John?
Thank you, Tori. And I don't know if the rest of you are hearing the little noise interruptions that are coming through. I hope that's not distracting in any way. But I do want to thank R2D2 for making the time to come from the set of Star Wars to join our call. You know, since I've written for just about every section of the paper, my talks are all over the map as well. But I will be giving two talks that hit my current beat. The first, of course, about climate change. What's next? I'll be talking about why global climate is changing, where the research is headed, what we're finding out. But it'll be also a look at the news around this. We'll be talking about the papal encyclical on climate change that just came down, what effect that has between now and our trip. We'll be talking about the divestment movement, whether that is a help or a distraction from climate change issues, but also the changing economics of renewable energy and the fact that a lot of what's giving people like Al Gore optimism about climate change and being able to fight it comes not from government regulation, but from the changing economics of putting up solar panels and wind systems. So there'll be a lot to discuss there. Since we'll be on the oceans, I'll be talking about trashing our oceans and the more than 8 million metric tons of plastic waste that end up in the seas every year, and the way that you've probably heard about these floating islands of trash that can be found in various spots in the world where ocean currents come together. How in the world did it all get there? This is everything from massive tangles of fishing nets to the tiny microplastic beads that we use in our exfoliant facial scrubs, in which flush their way from our sinks into the lakes and then on into the oceans. And what effect does that plastic have on marine life? And since we end up eating marine life at some point, what effect does it all have on us? It's something that I've written a number of stories about. The research is fascinating, and we'll be discussing what can be done about it as well. I'll be talking about the shape of journalism today. Like all journalists, I get asked by people, should I go into journalism? Or I've got a son or a daughter who's thinking of going into journalism. Would you please talk him out of it? And in trying to come up with answers to that question, and in lectures I've given over the last few years, it's been fascinating to look at where journalism actually is, and to be able to come up with an answer that's more optimistic than it would have been even just a few years ago. And I've been turned around to telling people that there are plenty of reasons to go into journalism if you're willing to look beyond traditional journalism models, and if you've got the passion to pursue it, and don't mind eating a lot of tuna fish. But But there's a lot to say there, and I think we'll have some fun with that talk. And finally, I'll be talking about the marriage revolution. In my book, Oddly Normal, yeah, I write about raising our own son, Joe, who is gay and who had problems along the way. The book is a reported book, and I gave a lot of legal history and psychological history in it, and that's some of what I want to convey in the talk. I want to talk about how we got to where we are with same-sex marriage, LGBT rights, and how the world that Joe and kids like him are facing today is very, very different from the world that my gay friends faced growing up. So I hope to see you there.
Some very serious topics being discussed there, Jim. Going back to the plastic, but we all think about plastic bottles, but microplastic beads, as you say, and cosmetics have just never come across my radar. So I think that's something for everybody to bear in mind there. Michael Schmidt, as you'll see from his slide here, in his first lecture title, states he joined the Times as a desk clerk and now covers the president. Even if you don't know his name, you'll know his work because Michael broke the Hillary Rodham Clinton email server story. Michael?
Thanks for having me. I've been in the Times for 10 years. I started answering the phones on the foreign desk in the middle of the war in Iraq, and it was my job to get the correspondence there on the phone with the editors. I was lucky enough to go on to become a reporter in the sports section where I covered off the field and legal issues in sports, steroids, and doping. I then had the chance to go to Iraq for a year where I covered 2011, which was the last year of the American occupation there. And I've been in Washington for 3 years now, covering federal law enforcement and other regulatory issues and investigative things. I've had a chance to travel with the president 3 times in the past year and learn more about how he sees the world and how he operates up close. One of the topics I really would like to get into is about ISIS. I had a chance last year to cover a lot of the administration's response to ISIS. For many months, the administration hadn't really been giving it a lot of attention, but last summer it really came to the forefront. And I'd like to explain why the administration was so late to the game on it and what they have done to try and do more about it. And here we are a year later, and they have not made a significant amount of progress. And ISIS still has a huge hold on significant parts of Iraq and Syria. I'd like to also talk about, give a talk on Hillary Clinton in her emails. I broke that story earlier this year, and it's an important story about how she was able to create a special system for herself when she was Secretary of State that prevented nearly all of her important communications, basically shielded them from Congress and any type of oversight and from Freedom of Information Act requests. Why did she do this? How did she do this? And why is it that we're learning about it now? And what impact could it have on her presidential candidacy? Is this something that really resurrects images people have of the Clintons from the 90s? Had they sort of shed that and has that resurrected that? And what does that really mean for her going forward? The other topic I'd like to give a talk on is the U.S. foreign policy and how President Obama sees the world and sees American power. His views of American power are, of course, strongly impacted by the war in Iraq and by President Bush. And President Obama is very reluctant to use American military power. And when he has done so, he has done so largely unsuccessfully. He did so in Libya, where he helped topple the Gaddafi regime, and that has turned out to be a complete disaster, as Libya is now as a failed state. He surged troops in Afghanistan. That turned out to not have much impact. It had some impact, but not certainly what he had hoped. But what does he believe American power is today? Is it soft power? And what is he trying to do with his foreign policy in terms of moving the United States certainly towards Asia and certainly towards a largely trying to restrict its use of military force, including in Iraq now, where he's trying to basically fight ISIS without many American troops on the ground.
very hot topics there. I mean, obviously I see the news all the time, and I know that I feel like I need to learn much more about what's going on there to really be able to give an opinion one way or the other. Thanks, Michael. Now over to Peter. For 18 years, he wrote for the Times. From science and finance to travel and technology, his knowledge is extensive. And that's before I mention that he lectured at Stanford and is a published author. Peter?
Thanks, Tori. I appreciate it. And through the wonders of technology, I'm reaching you today from a Starbucks on a busy street. So I apologize. Not just R2D2, but the entire Starfleet seems to be flying by here. I apologize for the background noise, but I wanted to start out. Technology has been my beat for quite a while. I remember in 1987, the Times convened a panel of editors to talk about the New York Times in the year 2000. And I remember walking in with a computer screen and being asked by the managing editor, well, this internet thing, how do we know that it's not just another fad like CB radio? And actually, in retrospect, that was a pretty good question. At that time, there was not a World Wide Web. The entire population of the internet was measured in tens of thousands of people. And if you look at it today, there are now 3 billion people connected to the internet. There are millions of websites. And what I want to talk about on this cruise is the fact that we're only just beginning. We're about to enter a new phase of the internet called the Internet of Everything, which is going to bring about changes that I think are going to be a magnitude greater than anything we've seen in the last 25 years. It's because the tens of billions of objects are going to be connected to the internet, not just computers and people like we have today, but we'll be connecting everything from factory robots to automobiles to even the personal devices that you wear, like the Apple Watch and other things. There's a tremendous hype cycle about the Internet of Things. You hear people talking about the wonders of your toothbrush being able to talk to your barbecue grill. But actually, the impact is going to touch all of us on a daily basis. It will help generate trillions of dollars in economic benefits and savings on the energy grid, making traffic more manageable. Anyway, I'd love to talk about that. That's just one of many transformational technologies, which is the next topic. There are so many technologies advancing at an exponential pace today that it's hard to pick just 5 of them, but I would like to look at 5 technologies that are going to have an impact on our lives probably as great as the internet does today. One of them is robotics, which I think is going to be a major industry. Robots are getting smarter and more ubiquitous and more talented. We've seen robots come about. Drones in particular are in the news, but we're also going to be talking about household robots, medical robots, and others. Artificial intelligence, the advances there in the last 25 years have been remarkable as well. We are coming to an age when doctors are consulting computers to help them with cancer diagnoses. Businesses are being run by computers. And, we even have robotic newspaper reporters, which I think is going to be a challenge for our industry. 3D printing, people are printing body parts now with 3D printers. Nanotechnology is leading to new types of medical devices that can be swallowed and do diagnostics within the body. Bioinformatics, the ability to detect thousands of diseases with just a single drop of blood on a computer chip. Those are all types of things that I'd like to be talking about. Security and privacy, that's on everybody's mind these days. We discovered, thanks to Edward Snowden, that we have very little privacy. All of our information is being hoovered up and analyzed in different parts of the world. We have hackers that are gaining access to databases containing our private information. Basically, we're living in a data-driven world. Our data is up there, and the question is, Is anything secure anymore? Is anything private? And finally, the future of news. That question going back to 1987, what will be the future of the New York Times? Will there even be a printed New York Times 10 years from now? Will there even be a New York Times 10 years from now? Those are all legitimate questions as we see the transformation that the internet and changing demographics have brought on the whole news industry. And I look forward to talking about it. Thank you.
Lisa. Hopefully by now we can say that the internet isn't a fad, although as you say, it's still very early days. And I'll be intrigued to know what you say about the future of the New York Times. So a big thanks to all 5 of today's special guests. I know it's been a whirlwind overview, but obviously to hear more and their topics and their speeches in full, please join us on the Queen Mary 2 in January the 2nd. I'm sure, however, all of you listening in have got a lot of questions, both about the tour and also to our experts as well. So this is your opportunity to ask anything that's on the tip of your tongue. You can use the panel in the right-hand side of the screen to type those and submit them now. So whilst you do that, I'm going to cover off some of our frequently asked questions myself. So to start off with, is international airfare included? Well, we always get asked, can I use my air miles? And because of that, we don't include international airfare in our tour prices. We want to make sure that you're able to book the flights how is most suitable for you. What cabins are available? Well, for Times Journeys guests, we've got the Club Balcony, the Princess Grill, and the Queen's Grill Suite available. However, we can look at other cabin types on request. How active is the tour? Well, the focus, of course, is on relaxing and being able to attend and enjoy all of the lectures. So walking on this trip is really kept to a minimum. And is the tour suitable for single travellers? Well, many Times Journeys guests travel on their own. They love meeting new people during the trip. So yes, please, if you're on your own, do book up and come with us, and we'd love to have you join. So those are some of my frequently asked questions. We're going to turn now to those that have been submitted. And the first question that's been asked is, how is dinner arranged? Well, on board we have both an early seating and a late seating for dinner. And also, depending on the cabin type that you book, you'll have seating in different dining areas as well. I mentioned earlier that there is a drinks package included in this trip. Now, for anybody, it comes the standard that you get $9. Drinks under $9 are included. If you're in one of the grill suites, then you get drinks up to the value of $12 included. And then finally, another question we've been asked is, what's the size of the rooms? Well, obviously, it depends again on the cabin type that you book. However, as a general rule of thumb, the club balconies are between 242 and 248 square feet. The Princess Grill rooms are between 335 and 513 square feet. And the Queen's Grill is 506 square feet, including balcony. Now, we've just also been asked, what date is the cruise? Well, that's a great question. So the cruise itself departs on January the 3rd. The tour starts January the 2nd from New York City, and that's 2016. Does the theatre have enough capacity to hold all the guests for a popular speaker? Well, there's 2,500 people on board this ship. I'm not sure we'd be able to accommodate all of them, and it is going to therefore be a first come, first served basis. So if there's somebody that you're particularly interested in hearing from and want to know more, then I'd suggest you get there early to make sure that you can hear them speak. Question: how many days? So this goes from the 2nd to the 10th of January, so that's 9 days. And yes, we also do have a post-cruise extension as well. So let me just talk to that very briefly. So for those of you that have already signed up or are ready to sign up and want to find out about the post-cruise extension, it's a 3-night trip where you'll be based in London at the 4-star Rubens Hotel. You'll have the opportunity to attend a West End show, a pre-theatre reception, exclusive tour of Spencer House, a great look at the new BBC Television Centre, which is state of the art, and learn more about international media in London. And then we'll also have an expert guide with you talking about the culture and the history in London. And then you'll also get a welcome reception and a farewell reception and dinner as well. Here's a recap summary for everybody here. So it's a 9-day trip, January the 2nd to January the 10th, 2016. The club balconies cost from $3,970. That's per person when it's double occupancy. Princess Grill Suites from $5,050, and the Queen's Grill Suites from $6,920. Obviously, single occupancy rates are available as well. There was a question from somebody earlier about tuxedos, and there are 2 formal nights on the cruise ship, and it's a really big part of getting dressed up, and people like to do that. So although it's not 100% compulsory, it is something that's recommended and that's enjoyed. So that can be something to look forward to or not, depending on your style. And then there are some specific questions coming through around open dining and whether 3 people can share a room, share one room together. Of course, it's going to depend on the type of room that you get, but I would suggest talking to our reservation specialist on 855-698-7979 for all of these individual questions, because they'll be really able to answer them depending on the particular cabin type that you're interested in. To just wrap things up, I'd like to say a big thank you again there to our 5 experts who joined us, to Clyde, David, John, Michael, and Peter. Thank you very much. We look forward to having you on board in January. And as I say, for everybody else who's got any questions or that's ready to book, more importantly, please do call our reservation specialist. They're available on 855-698-7979.